Okay. Hey everyone, this is Thursday, September 17th. This is the Contour office hours. So I'm not sure what y'all have questions about. I'm happy to answer anything, or I think today's schedule was debugging Envoy or debugging Contour and that sort of thing. Double check. Yeah, today was designing for failure, how to deploy Contour so Envoy can fail. So this was sort of, sounds like an abstract for a talk. I think it was an abstract for a talk. Anyway, I'll quit talking. What do y'all want to talk about?
Hey Steve, hey Chazon. I didn't really have, I didn't put anything kind of on the list on our side. I've got Kevin and Andrew that joined, and they're with me actually. So any questions I have will probably be within their realm as well. But if we don't really have any topics today, I mean, I'm more than happy to talk with you guys about stuff. Maybe we could talk about the auth stuff that we were working on yesterday and kind of our experiences there.
Sure.
And what Andrew's looking at from what kind of like Envoy is offering. Obviously continue to learn more about the features that you guys are working on and developing as well. But yeah, I mean, we've got a few things that I definitely could bring up to, make the most of our time here. So.
Yeah, that's fine with me. Like I said, this is all for you folks. So um, that's a good starting point. Excuse me. And then Makai, you have any questions? I saw you popped on. We can work through that. So yeah. So what about auth? So I guess to be fair too, you're hitting the bleeding edge of stuff that we haven't really finished, and there's no docs for. So
Yep.
Yeah, it's going to be a little painful. But yeah, thanks for going through that. So did you get it all working? Is everything up and
Oh
running
yeah,
now?
no, not at all. Not painful at all. I mean, more than happy to be the guinea pig here and kind of guide whatever. I know that when you get a feature out to users, they're kind of like uh, dumb when it comes to like they're gonna break it in ways you never even thought they could. And so if I could be that that end user where it's like, wait, why are you configuring it that way, or whatever, just to kind of battle harden it. I guess more than happy to go through that process with you guys. I appreciate the support. So I think overall my experience with the auth stuff yesterday was really positive. Turns out I think we got it working. Again, this is bleeding edge for us as well. I think we got it working this morning where we were able to create the authentication kind of like interceptor, registering it with Contour and getting our requests to go through it. So we essentially got a permission denied, which is our authenticator really that's all it did was like, if this, then respond this way, else respond this way.
Right.
And it looked like it worked pretty well. So I think one of the issues that we're just dealing with right now is just learning how the authenticator, the auth services work with Envoy as well. And then also maybe one of the things that we could probably do is, hey, Andrew, are you on? Can you?
I am, yeah.
Okay. You're a little bit quiet, Andrew. I don't know if other folks can hear you. But I was thinking maybe what we could do too is kind of look at the different services that Envoy offers and kind of where Contour integrates with those different services, just to make sure that we have a really good idea, because they've got like things like HTTP filters and auth services and stuff like that. And maybe, Andrew, it would be good to bring up some of the links that we were looking at today, and just kind of going over with the Contour guys, what is it that Contour actually offers and can integrate with the auth stuff, so that we've got a clear understanding of, okay, sure, we can do this on our local dev when we're able to configure Envoy directly, but when it comes to actually getting this on our K8s cluster with Contour, like, oh, Contour doesn't integrate with Envoy this way, or hey, maybe this is a feature that we do need to add in Contour so that we can configure the auth stuff. You know what I'm saying? Maybe just kind of take a look at some of these things and get a better idea. Because I think from my perspective, I'm still trying to understand how Envoy, like, it offers a lot of stuff with like the HTTP filters, the network filters, the listener filters, and way down under HTTP filters. And I think like way down they've got the auth stuff. And so I don't know if like Contour is limited to that very specific thing, or if there's additional things we could integrate. So anyways, maybe talking a little bit about that too. But that's just some of my thoughts, Steve. Anyways, we could definitely talk about today.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry for my distraction. I was tweeting. about office hours. Yeah, there's a ton that Envoy offers, and this comes up a lot with folks in terms of like people will say, hey, like Envoy has these 5 features. How do I do that in Contour? And sometimes it's like, well, hey, we don't have that yet in Contour, because I guess there's a couple of different things you can look at. One is just understanding the complexity of Envoy. So part of there's a philosophy doc somewhere on the Contour website. But part of what Contour was designed to do was to help you eliminate some of those struggles with how Contour is. So the idea is like our thoughts of having good defaults for things and valid configurations and that sort of stuff, but also automating through the stuff that you may not need to deal with. So if there's certain filters you need to turn on, then hopefully we can turn them on for you. But as we grow, that always changes, right? Folks needs. I know Tara and I, we were chatting this morning about the Cypher suites and stuff. Contour thought, hey, we'll define the proper Cypher suites that are good for an application, but that's different for different users, right? Their requirements and rules can vary. So we're going to look to add some configuration for that as well. So some of it is just Contour is only what, 2.5 years old, 2 years old-ish, 3 years. I forget how long it's been. And we just don't have the maturity of someone like Nginx maybe, where they've just been around for forever. So we just need to add those features. Like auth is a good example of that. We've talked about having auth here forever, and we just haven't implemented it yet until now. So that's kind of where we are. Cool. Yeah, in terms of so I guess your second question was, how does like Contour and Envoy interact together in terms of turning on things, or how does Envoy interact with certain things to enable certain services? Was that? I think that was your question.
Yeah. So in terms of like some of these different things, like if you go to the Envoy docs, they've got all their filters that they have listed, like the V3 API reference, and maybe just kind of looking at some of this stuff and kind of understanding a little bit better, like which integrations. Yep, perfect. Yep, yes, sir. Yeah. That's the one. And so I think if you go to like API, and then they've got their V2 and V3. So I think the auth service stuff only supports V2 API. Is that right?
There's a couple of things, I guess, with auth. So a lot of services that Envoy implements has a gRPC backend. So things like you're seeing with auth. So you stand up some gRPC service, and then you connect the two together. So you tell Envoy, hey, your auth, resolver is this external endpoint here, and then Envoy will reach out to that to say basically, hey, I got this request. What should I do with it? And then that external service is in charge of saying thumbs up or thumbs down. The same thing happens with rate limiting, right? There's an interface that you configure. You set up a gRPC service, and you tell Envoy, hey, when a request comes in, go out to this external service and say, should this be rate limited or not, depending on the request and who the user is and everything. So that works for a lot of things. I know in a later version, I think the last version, or maybe it's not even released yet, this came up in the last community call. There's some OIDC stuff built as a filter into Envoy. And what that would mean was you don't have to stand up that gRPC service then and have all these configurations. You can just basically turn on a filter, pass some config to Envoy, and then Envoy itself will do all of that authentication stuff that this custom service you're going to write is going to do. So the win for you as an operator is that you don't have to manage another service, another thing to deploy and all that sort of stuff, which is kind of cool. So I forget where that is.
Yeah, I saw an issue actually where you guys were talking about that, right? And so it would be like more OIDC would be offered more as a configuration than, we have to like essentially like, manage another pod and then program the OIDC standard, right? But I think there were some things about like claims and stuff. It's like, well, yeah. So it seemed like the conversation did get a little bit confusing there, but.
Yeah, the tricky part is like the way it is now is like what James wrote with all this auth stuff is all the plumbing and framework to do authentication, right? So it's enough to stand up, Contour, which is talking to that extension service. And the reason that extension service exists, I guess the idea was to have it give you a way to have feedback, right? So I think what you don't, what you don't see in there now is all of the conditions and all the status stuff. That's the stuff that hasn't gotten in yet. So basically the idea is that if you configure, say, my auth server is at this endpoint and it has these parameters. If something's incorrect with that, the idea is to have Contour then set feedback in that extension service to let you know, here's what's wrong, here's what's configured wrong, or here's why something may not be working.
Mm.
Because it's hard, you can't add those to your service, spec. There's no condition spec on a service, Kubernetes service, where your actual gRPC endpoint is going to live. So that's why the extension services exist in the middle. It's just like a shim to be able to have more information about the status of what's going on. We can also reuse that for again other services. So things like rate limiting and there's other logging algorithm or logging implementations. Those can all use that same extension service type interaction to point to different services. Because that's the idea of where we're going. But the built-in OIDC stuff in Envoy just wouldn't have you stand up all of that stuff. Now, the tricky part again is, and that's what I think James was talking about, is like a good example is Gangway. We wrote this at Heptio. And what Gangway does is Gangway it's a little website. And what you do is you configure this to whatever provider your API server is using. And then you basically have a user sign into this site. And when they sign in, they auth with that provider. So say you're authing with Google or Azure or something. Once they auth, then this will reach out to your API server in Kubernetes, and it'll go and generate a proper kubeconfig file for your particular Kubernetes instance, right? So it'll have the right client ID and secret and refresh tokens and all those different things. So you can literally copy and paste this onto your machine and then get a working, OIDC config easily. And I think some cloud providers now do this for you, but a lot of this was before those days existed. I guess I bring that here just because there's a whole bunch of configuration values. I'm trying to see that you can set basically to configure all the bits. I haven't been in here in a while. But in terms of like the clients, the secrets, the all the different bits that come in with OIDC, right? And it's kind of like it's a standard, but they're all different in a way. It's in here somewhere. I know I'm dogging on here you go. The certificates, the cluster names, the scopes, what redirect, the client IDs. Can the client secret be empty or not? What's your username, email claim? To map certain claims, the username, map certain claims, the emails, all those different things. So you kind of get into this then, and you've got to configure all of this in Contour to then enable that filter. At the same time, you've got to configure all of this today in that gRPC endpoint service somewhere. So it's, where do you want to configure it? Where should it go? I don't know, So that's that. But I personally like it because you don't have to deploy as much, right? If you're a user of Contour and you want to have OIDC as your auth mechanism, then just fill out a configuration file and then boom, you should be off to the races without having to deploy all these extra bits and parts. But maybe you need that. I don't know. You know what I mean? That's where that feedback would come into play, helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, we're happy to start cranking on this. And like I said, I mean, we did have some successes this morning, with it, but we're just starting to kind of get our feet wet in this. And I think one of the points that came up this morning, kind of like in our morning call, is Andrew was kind of going through these different APIs for Envoy and just trying to understand, like where does, from the auth-Z perspective, right? Where are the boundaries in terms of where Contour supports, these different, so these extensions. So these extension services, right, that are part of the Contour configs, is it essentially kind of designed to map to these extensions here that you're seeing, within the API reference there? So like, so is the goal that, Contour would offer these extensions and you could have different types of extensions like the network filter or an auth-Z filter or an HTTP filter? I was just trying to kind of understand, like with these extensions, like how do they map to the Envoy API and where do we see this going in the future, essentially too? So.
Sure. Well, this might help. So you've got Contour. Let me just draw a little bit, if that's big enough. So we have Contour. What you do is you implement this thing called an extension service, and this is a CRD, Contour CRD, I guess. And then this thing talks to. There you go with this. This is your K8 service.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and this is typically, well, Envoy's case is gRPC. Whoops, there you go. So so you deploy Contour and I guess Envoy's down here too. Envoy would be a database. How about that? you deploy Envoy, and you configure this. So you need to deploy your application. So in this case, this will be your auth service, and this is what's going to implement your auth mechanism. So you deploy this application in pod, however you want to do that, however that works, right? You stand that up somehow. It could be in your cluster. It could be some external service running on a VM. Wherever that lives in the world, I guess is all that matters. And then you have this extension service. And this CRD is basically a reference to this service here. So it's really a layer of indirection, right? Today, when you configure Contour and you configure some sort of ingress route, HTTP proxy, you basically talk to these services directly, right? You touch these endpoints. In this world of this extension stuff, you need to now reference this extension service. And again, the reason of that is to give you, what should I use? Something like this. This is going to give you things like conditions and status information. So the idea here is to say, like, for whatever reason, if something's configured incorrectly, the idea is to populate these set of conditions and status information to tell you something's wrong with this setup here, right? And that's all it does. So this is a generic integration point, because we could swap out auth here with, say, rate limiting, and implement rate limiting the same way, because Envoy implements the exact same way. It's just a different service or a different filter in the Envoy configuration. I'm thinking if that's answering where we're going or not. Yeah, so this is just generic. So this is the only reason for having that. Now, the idea of what gets implemented where, I guess, is dependent on where you define it, right? So in here on your proxy, and I could show you, let me just share my screen. Share screen, this one. That's the right one. Your screen sharing. Do you all still see draw.io?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Out here in Contour, so there's, I guess I could show you in the API docs, but there's that authorization bit, authorization server. So this person, right, and that's defined. And this is on the, so where I am, this is it's not as difficult, but this is the virtual host. So your HTTP proxy. So you've got your HTTP proxy .spec.virtual host. And in that virtual host, this is where you define this authorization bit, right? And this is where you link it all together. So to enable auth, you're going to first, deploy all these bits. Deploy your auth service, your auth application, I guess we'll call it. You'll deploy these two bits, and you'll create the CRD and all this stuff. And then you're going to link it all together. And that comes here on this CRD. So this is your HTTP proxy now. So you're going to say, all right, so for this fully qualified domain name, so this could be, containersteve.com. We're going to have, some TLS secret on here. So secret, and this isn't looking like anything it should, but is, my secret. You'll put a certificate on there, and then you'll say, all right, let's define my authorization bits. And then here's where you link to that extension service. So now at this point, Contour knows, hey, you're looking to do authorization. It'll go look for that extension service that exists in Kubernetes somewhere, and then apply this policy to it. So the fact that this is in an authorization server struct tells it that we're going to do authorization. Once we add rate limiting, I assume we're going to have something similar. We'll have, a rate limit server struct, right? And we'll stick that same thing on there, and we'll have this exact same reference.
Yep.
Up here, like that, right? And then in your HTTP proxy, you'll have an authorization bit, and now you'll have a rate limit bit, and then you'll do the same way. So then when Contour sees this, it'll turn on the rate limiting filter in Envoy, and then link these things up all together.
Yep.
And then it'll have a different set of parameters. It might have just this generic auth policy, which is this context. This is where things get tricky, because these are kind of bad, right? These contexts are sometimes hard to work with, right? Because they're so generic. Mm-hmm. I guess it's not bad. I guess to me, it's hard for me to give you feedback if the things are configured correctly or not. You know what I mean? If I have better types in here, then I can do more to give you feedback. But this becomes a black box, not knowing how your backend implementation is done. So that's how those things all kind of link together, if that all makes sense. That's the idea. That's the idea of this extension service. So it's a way to extend Contour with kind of other outside bits, either run by you or things that come from our examples. So out here in Contour, there's that example authorization server. So here's the Contour community or the Contour project. There's this auth server here. And this bit has, I think this is a generic test server, which is all in memory. And then you can run an HTTP password one, and then we can add more to here too. So if someone goes and writes one to auth against, auth 0 or something, or Google or whatever, we can add that to this repo if we want to.
Yep.
Does that all make sense? I feel like I'm I'm talking on and on and on, but
No. This is tremendous. So like in terms of like how you manage, so it seems like one of the challenges would be like managing configurations for these different things. So let's say, for example, that you wanted to stand up an OIDC provider via just configurations without having to like implement a gRPC server, for example. Then you'd have to have some sort of CRD that provides all those configurations, right? One of the things I think I've really enjoyed, with Contour is the limited number of CRDs. But I think one of the concerns I have with what we're seeing is that if the extension service is going to be for so many different things like authorization filters or rate limiters, that where do we start putting the configurations for these different extension services, right? Are those going to go in the extension service object, or do we need to start creating additional CRDs for those particular items? Does that
yeah, well, I guess that's the thing. Like the configuration for how this works. So say this is an OIDC, and say that we're going to auth to Google for whatever reason. In here you're going to want to have like the API URL, the redirect URL, the clients. There's like a client you're going to have. There's a bunch of OIDC parameters you have to add to that. I mean, at this point, this is all on you deploying this stuff over here. So this is all these bits in the back. Like this stuff over here is all on you to do right at this point, the way it's written. Text. On you.
Yep.
If that makes sense. You know what I mean? So because it's how to make that go to the top, but you get it. Because again, the stuff that we wrote so far, this extension service and all this stuff, is just the plumbing to turn this stuff on. So you can't really configure anything in this. The bits you saw here in here under the policy, this is extra stuff you can pass to your auth server. So if you had to add additional things to help your auth server, say, authenticate whatever request. So maybe this is, at this route, it's an auth route or whatever. This is stuff that you can add so that when the request comes through to here, to these bits, it has more information to make that decision around what to do, I guess, with the request. Should it be authorized or not? But today it's still on you. So in terms of all of this parameters and stuff that come into play, it's sort of on that service to figure out. Now I say on you, meaning on that implementation. So that implementation could be that generic auth server that we talked about. We could have an example in here, this thing. However, this does parameters. I don't even know how it does it. There's like flags on here on the server is how this is doing it today. But again, that's on that implementation of that backend. So it's kind of good because you can put in and have this box be whatever you want. If you have some sort of internal auth that your company manages or your users want to use, then you can do that. That's that. But if we get into the world of, and that's what I was looking at this one, I think this is that OAuth filter we talked about. I was just looking for if there was docs on it here. Design docs. What was it called? Turned to a new issue, I think. Anyway, so whatever these bits are. So I guess what we got to figure out then is if we do turn this on, this is that built-in one, then what happens is this whole box here goes away.
Right.
It turns the red. So this all stuff goes away. You probably still have this extension service to then configure that filter. Maybe it's up here now. This guy. So now this is your OIDC filter. but now there has to be some sort of configuration for that to basically define these things we did here, right? So these bits. So where do you stick these things?
Right.
That's your question? Is it a CRD? Is it a config map? Is it?
Yep.
I don't know. That's what I guess we got to figure out. Where that stuff should come from.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
And it's the same thing with rate limiting. Rate limiting has a similar issue because because I did rate limiting like a year and a half ago, and then it got stuck, and then we kind of lost track of it. But rate limiting is the same scenario where you have it's often have the same thing. So you have this setup, but there's certain parameters out here on this application to define what to talk to and how to talk to certain things. So in rate limiting, for example, there's different. Here, this is the one I was looking at: Envoy proxy rate limit. So Lyft has one that got moved over. Rate limit. This is the one that Lyft uses, and there's a couple other ones I believe. But there's a some configuration on this side to set up. So there's like different buckets and different things you configure. Here it is, yeah. So you create like a domain ID and you create some like rules basically. And these rules define, should the same client IP only be allowed to have so much requests per some interval. So maybe, my house can only send requests to your domain at, 100 requests per minute or something. You need to define all of those bits here in this service, and then link that rule to a route in your proxy config, so that when you hit /admin, then these rules will come into effect in terms of rate limiting, right? So there's two different parts to here, and this is kind of where it gets kind of tricky, because again, we've said Contour is this one-stop shop to help you make it easier, but now you've got this like split idea where you've got all this stuff over here to configure, and then all the stuff on the left side to configure, and they've all got to kind of match for it to work. And again, the idea here is to have this service give you some of that feedback to understand when things aren't configured properly or aren't going to work. But yeah, so that's the idea, and that's why it gets trickier. That's why I think it's probably why we've gotten to this point, because they're just so crazy and complex. And it's going to be hard to fit everyone's needs, I guess. So at least in this pattern, you can implement your own service the way you need to do it, and then it should all link up just fine. There's no like Contour limitation as to, we got to go change Contour's code to have your thing work. I think that was the original design idea.
One thing that I wonder that in this newer OAuth filter, what's the name, I guess, I suppose that it's possible then to have a fine-grained authorization, like having a certain URL or like a sub-path of the URL requiring some special privileges in the jot token, if it's just a generic. Because in this design that we now will have, you can do as complex authorization as you want, because every request will be sent to this external authorization gRPC server.
Right.
So then you can authorize every request and hopefully look at the jot token and see that it has certain grants that are needed for that specific path and for that specific request.
Yep. Right.
But in the other, I don't recall what was the other filter name, the newer filter in Envoy. That if that like disappears completely, the gRPC server disappears completely, then it probably cannot like have very complicated instructions for authorization anymore. It must be something more simple, that you just like have a jot token and then you are authorized to whatever URL.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, it might be a little. I'm not sure, I guess. Yeah, if you're doing just plain, OIDC of what this filter up here is supposed to do, that might be a one-for-one swap for all this other stuff. But I'm not sure. Yeah, but if you had something, Tara, if you had something else that's more complex that was doing a lot more, maybe you do have a little more freedom over here to understand, what you need to do.
For example, I was thinking that for example, Keycloak, it has support for doing or acting as an authorization server. it can have really complicated rules written for like handling all different types of authorization rules for different types of URLs and HTTP verbs, so on, according to what you have in the job token.
Right. Yep. And what that turns into is a whole other thing up here then. This whole box duplicates. If you're hosting that in the cluster as well, this becomes another box. Oh, sorry, I'm all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the debate of like what should be declarative, like what can we do with like declarative, but at what point does it kind of stop making sense, in terms of like, okay, we've got so many declarative configurations that it's actually become harder to manage than just like, having a service that as a developer we can, easily get in there and just do the things we need to do. So
yeah, that's what you'd have here. And that's the struggle. The more flexible it is, the more complex it's going to turn into. So, because all the little knobs turn into places you can do it wrong or things you'd have to set up. So, so hopefully this will work out. And again, we don't have all the bits here for the status stuff. So, we'll see how that shakes out in terms of helping understand, how these bits on the right here are getting configured or not configured. And there is some built-in things too as well. I know there's some fall-through things. So when you define that authorization bit, there's this fail open. So this is sort of like you can enable it all, but it will, if the auth server fails to respond, it'll still pass the request through. I know Envoy has the same thing for rate limiting. So if for whatever reason your rate limit service fails, your users all won't get errors. It'll just skip the rate limiting at that point and just move on. So there's some things in here built in as well to help let you like turn this on, but not take down your applications or your requests before you're ready to get it going with it. Cool. Yeah, and we still have docs to go. So we've got the status stuff here in the extension service, as well as all of the docs surrounding all of this to help understand how this plays. So that's the bits that are missing, I think, today. I did push up a PR. I think Steve was reviewing it for turning on the extensions, the CRDs by default. That was probably you ran into, Chad. And then also, I think maybe you merged it, Steve.
I think I merged that one this morning.
Okay.
yeah, I've been monitoring it. Yep, I got the email that it was merged. That was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, we took off the check to see if the CRD exists.
And I think that was part of what Chad ran into yesterday, because when Contour started, the CRD didn't exist. And then later you applied the YAML for it, and then it did exist, but the informer hadn't been set up. So then the events weren't actually hitting the Kubernetes cache within Contour.
Right.
So that issue should be gone now.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's not really an issue I don't think we have to address, right? That's kind of like just specific for me because I didn't have the CRDs and then I kind of applied them after Contour had already started and all that other stuff, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so now with this PR that we merged, the extension service CRD is just part of our standard bundle of YAML. So when you deploy Contour, this CRD will get deployed along with everything else, and all should be good.
Awesome. Yeah. So I mean, ultimately, yeah, guys, we were able to get our extension, our auth gRPC server, capturing requests, and now we're going to start working on, doing stuff, and so far so good. Really appreciate all the support yesterday. Thank you.
That's cool. Thanks for getting it all tried out. It's it's fun to have folks, not that I don't have folks using it, but y'all been very engaged. So hopefully this has been good for you. So that was the whole point of these office hours too, was to help make sure everyone's doing well. So cool. What else do you want to talk about? Or is there anything else on there you want to chat about for auth?
I don't think so. I do want to make sure. So, Andrew, while we're just kind of on this topic, I don't mean to take up the whole office hours, but Steve, I've got tons I could ask you about and talk about with Contour, man. So, if nobody's got anything, I'd be more happy to continue to, ask some questions or talk about stuff. But, and I know Andrew, I don't think you have any questions yet. I just want to give him an opportunity, but, just leave the floor open too. I don't want to take up the whole time. So.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Andreas, I saw you said hi in chat. I had my windows messed up, so hello. Yeah, anyone else have a question to pop in, and then we can, if not, then Chad, you can go.
Yeah, I was, I had, my colleague was asking today, I think, or yesterday, a question in Slack about this, that there was, he had an IPv6 problem. It appears that for some reason for this cluster, the IPv6 routes are not updated when Contour already starts to connect. So it fails because of that. No route to host is because of that. I don't know if it's something like a CNI problem. We don't know that. But anyway, the fact is that when Contour is now able to try to connect to the API server, the IPv6 routes are still missing, and for like the less than a second after they will be there. But I wonder that what is then generally, I mean, of course, in some cases, people of course think or have this this model that the dependencies should not be expected to be up, that you should have some kind of fallback that you don't immediately crash if, for example, a database dependency is not up when container starts. That is kind of a general pattern that I see.
Sure.
But on the other hand, of course, API server, maybe the same applies, but I can understand that people would expect that to be up always. But how do you see from the like the initial start point of view? And I got also curious, and I haven't tested it, that what then happens when API server goes down when the connection has been previously established and Contour is already running.
Yeah. So did you say, so first off, did you say this was like, this happens when you have a brand new cluster, or is it you're initiating a new cluster and then deploying Contour all fast, all really quickly?
Actually, I haven't seen the cluster myself, but how
Okay.
I understood it, that it happens then again. I'm a little bit unclear myself that how I would like expect that it would be easy to understand if it would be a new cluster, or let's say that Contour pod is scheduled to a new node in the cluster where there, but apparently I think it happens more often.
Okay. Yeah, because all this logic that we're seeing is all client Go. So Contour uses client Go
Right.
to generate that client. I'm just looking to see where we do that. So what happens is this Contour goes out to try and create that connection to the API server. It's one of the first things that this does. I think it's down here at the bottom. No, it got moved. It's in K8s now, I think. So what happens is if that client fails, I think it's this. If this fails to spin up, then Contour just sig faults. I mean, it's up here. It just it fails because it at that point, if we can't connect to the Kubernetes, then there's no point in going on because nothing's gonna happen. And then I think what happened, yeah, here it is. So this is where I'll make this bigger for you. This is where we create the connections here. So this is in the code. This is in the serve.go. This is the Contour serve command. So we go and create, basically pass in the kube config, whether that's in cluster or out of cluster. It's based on this flag. And then here, yeah, if this errors out for whatever reason, we just return because it's at this point we're done. So everything in here is all client Go, all this stuff in here. There's nothing in Contour specific in terms of connecting that we could really change. We really should open up an issue in the client Go repo However, like you said, we could try again here in this spot if we wanted to. In this loop here, have a back off and say, hey, I tried to connect, I couldn't. Let's wait and then try again. You know, that would work just as well. I think out of just failing and letting it restart at this point was just as easy in a way. It was easier to implement in a sense, you know.
I can also like think that it makes, if there would be some kind of configuration error, it makes it very much like visible at that point when it does go into some crash loop. So having at least a retry that would retry infinitely would maybe even hide some problems and make them harder to troubleshoot.
Sure.
But on the other hand, I know that there is this common pattern that you shouldn't immediately die in like microservice pattern, that you shouldn't immediately die in the start if your dependencies are not there at the moment.
Yeah,
So
right, for sure. Yeah, I think we could have a PR here to have a back off and retry. I think that would be fine. I don't think there's anything really wrong with that. As long as Contour doesn't go ready yet. In terms of, because I don't want clients to connect to it before it's ready to go. That'll introduce a whole different problem. But yeah, not a whole lot fails. The only thing that fails is some of these core things. It's like if it can't connect to Kubernetes, and there's a couple other things in here that, like if we can't convert stuff, I think we blow up. Can't create our converter and stuff. Those are all the bits.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I don't have a whole lot. I know we chatted last night. We had a maintainer meeting, and Nick was thinking maybe something with like DNS or something, as to how,
Team was troubleshooting it a little bit more, and they found that it is actually the root that is missing. So the IPv6 roots are not set up. It seems like some kind of CNI problem or
Gotcha.
something.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. If you figure it out, that'd be great. To post back here, I asked just to create an issue just so we can all see it, and if it is something, you know, whatever the answer is, then someone else will run into it, I'm sure, at some point, and then we'll be able to understand. Yeah.
I got curious about the second part, and that I could try obviously this myself, but what happens if the API server connection is dropping out later? How does Contour deal with that, or the client go?
Yeah, I think it's just, it starts to log all kinds of crazy errors, because the watches all go down. So all the informers will stop informing on the resources. I'm trying to think if it'll connect back or not. I don't know if I've fully troubleshooted that, but nothing should, in my head, nothing should change. So Contour has, you know, a cache of all the resources that it knows about. So I think if the informers go down, whatever's in those caches should still serve properly to any envoy. Meaning you're not going to drop traffic. You're just going to stop making changes to traffic. So I think it all should sit. It's just Contour will log a whole bunch of errors while the API server is down. I think it'll just come back. I'm pretty sure that the informers will all reconnect automatically when it comes back. Yeah.
No, I should really try this out. It's quite interesting to see how.
Yeah, I think that would happen too is say you had an HA setup of your API servers, and one of those instances goes down, then Contour will lose connection to that instance, and it should go and reconnect through the load balancer or whatever mechanism you're doing your HA API servers, and connect back to one of those, and then the same thing should happen. So that should work. Knock on wood. I mean, that's all client Go stuff. So hopefully that's all. I think that would all work fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. No worries.
Hey, quick question on this. So when you say that the issue may be within the CNI, what provider are we talking about? Like Calico, Flannel?
Actually, I don't know even that. I'm not working with that cluster, but I kind of would have expected that it would be Calico, an IPv6 only cluster.
Right. Okay.
But I might be talking. I'm not really aware. I'm not working with that cluster.
Yeah, the interesting bit is they said that it worked in 1.6.
Yeah, but what my colleague was then thinking that maybe for some reason Contour has not now gotten faster. So because there is this delay before the root is added. So if
Gotcha.
contour is getting faster, then it like that there is a race condition that it might get to try it for the first time before the route is there.
Okay.
And in older version, for some reason, it was slower.
Yeah, I was trying to think of, I didn't know what version of, I had a DNS issue there. What version we had of Client Go in 1.6. If we've since upgraded, maybe Client Go is different in that.
Yeah, that's right.
Um,
And I suppose there isn't much happening before this
yeah.
connection is because it is one of the very first things anyway that it tries to connect the API server. So I would suppose that there is nothing much changing in contour between these versions that would make it slower or faster before creating the client code.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nothing's. Yeah, it's the same version actually. So that breaks my idea. So I can't blame somebody else, I guess.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, but it was repeatable for some reason. So something there is some kind of relation to the version, contour version. It sounds strange anyway.
Yeah. And all that V6 stuff is all. I even want to create. Because you can create a V6 cluster with kind. Did y'all know that? I was going to play around with it just to try and see if I could get it to run the same thing. If you go to configuration here under kind, you can pass in this IPv6 stuff.
Oh, cool.
But here's the but, is that it doesn't work on Docker for Mac because you've got to configure your Docker daemon to then forward IPv6 as well. So you've got to spin up you have to have a Linux machine somewhere. And all you do is you hop into here, into this config, and then add that stuff to this etc docker daemon.json, reload Docker, and then you should have an IPv6 cluster at that point. I did it a while ago. We could try it again if y'all want to try it for fun. But when I tried it the other day, yesterday, I think, or the day before, it wasn't working. My kind cluster my API server wouldn't respond. So I wasn't sure if it was me running at a VM or if it was something else. So
I haven't used IPv6 myself, even though I'm running on Linux. But
yeah.
So it may be something that I should do someday.
Yeah, last time I tried this was when someone had a question about IPv6, using it with Contour. I think they had a dual stack cluster, and they had to, they wanted to see what's up. I think there's some spots where you can configure, instead of having like the Contour name, you can have it's like : I think will tell it to look for the IPv6 address of your other service. Come on. There we go. So, yeah, you can see here, this is where I was trying it. So, I did upgrade to the latest version of Kind while doing this. That was the right move, I think, to try latest.
Yeah, it's something like 2 days old, I think. I just noticed it today that there is a new version.
Yeah, so the new one's out. It has 119 support, but you can see it just hangs when I do this. And I did do this Docker thing, this Docker daemon thing. So anyway, you don't have to stare at my screen if you don't want to. Whoops. I did add it. See, IPv6 true. I don't know. It's real slow for some reason. But yeah, that should work. We can. I just did work before. I'm not sure why it didn't for me last time, but yeah, this is Kind. So if you want a client, a V6 one, that's cool. It does say dual stack as well. I'm not sure where the status of that is, but I think this is either V4 by default or V6 if you want to set this. So I think you can swap in different CNIs as well. Yeah, so here's how you disable the default one. So you can turn that off, and then it's kind of like doing a kubadmin init on a node. You'll basically deploy all of your Kubernetes infrastructure, but you won't have a CNI yet, so everything will be pending. And then you can just apply your CNI that you want to use, whether it's Calico or Entrea or whatever, and you can apply that into Kind and then go from there, which is cool. So what else? You else have anything else to chat about? Or we can try and get this working if you want to try and do that.
Yeah. Actually, Steve, I do have to bounce here in a few
Sure.
minutes, but I did want to say thank you guys again for your support yesterday and hosting these community meetings. This is awesome, and you know, it really helps us, and thank you. So
Yeah, no worries. Yeah. Thanks for being engaged and helping. It's fun. We did have on the schedule, what was it? I think it was like debugging Envoy and something. So we could talk about how to debug when things go wrong. If no one else has any other questions, but if someone has something to chat about, we can absolutely do that.
Yeah, that would be useful actually. You know, given what happened yesterday, to know like, you know, accessing, following the logs for Envoy, following the logs for Contour, enabling debugging was nice. And then also getting access to the Envoy config as well. Like all those debugging steps were really helpful. Yeah, so I think that would be a good thing, definitely.
Sure. Yeah.
And this is Andreas. I would have one question, but it's maybe more a beginner question as I just started to use Contour. So with this exposing Argo CD with multiple protocols, so I'm not sure if this is interesting for the rest because you seem pretty advanced compared to me at least.
No. We just happen to get off on this off tangent and stuff. Yeah. And yeah, no, for sure. So you read the one I was chatting with online?
Yeah.
Okay. You're Tricky 42. Cool. Yeah. So using Argo, let me get your link up here. This one. Joink. Nope. Wrong page. Here. This is what you're trying to set up.
Exactly. So, and looking, so, and I'm installing currently Argo CD with the Helm chart. So therefore the Ingress, let's say, objects are getting rendered. So I think for me, it would be more interesting with an Ingress to do it with Ingress instead of HTTP proxy.
Yeah.
But in general.
Yeah. So you're gonna need two things, I think. So we have a redirect. So Contour has a bunch of annotations to support ingress. Let's go out to, let's do here. There we go.
And maybe also to add a little bit, at least, so Contour in general is working in this cluster. So I just started then to add different parts, right? So right now, Contour for my services, let's say, it is already doing also, it's integrated with Cert Manager. With your configuration examples there, that was pretty easy. So for these services, the SSL certificates are also getting pulled from Let's Encrypt. So that's
okay.
That works all.
Awesome. So we should be able to, in theory, if we just make YAML, that's a new spec. All right. So if we hop out to here and we grab, we can just copy the Nginx stuff. And let's make this bigger to see. Cool. So in theory, all this can be the same. And there's Nginx class you can use. You can switch it to Contour if you want to do that. And then this one, I think, so SSL redirect, Contour just calls it this, force SSL redirect. So this will redirect from insecure to secure automatically. So we can just pop that into there. SSL pass through. What does that do? That doesn't terminate? That terminates TLS at the pod, right?
Yeah, exactly. So they have two ways. They describe two ways because Nginx has the limitation that it only supports per ingress one protocol.
Okay.
So therefore, when you only want to have one ingress, they pass it through and terminate at the pod. They have, I think, a little bit lower down, two ingress definitions, so one per protocol.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, okay, so we can do this. Yeah, for sure. So let's just hop into here. So we don't need this then. Well, maybe we'll just keep it for fun. yeah, so this is going to become contour. And then we can grab this one again. And then this you shouldn't need because by default, Envoy will proxy to the backend through HTTP anyway. So that we can just get rid of. And that should work like that, as is. And then what's the second one? The gRPC one. This is the one that gets goofy. So let's just go ... Cool. Again, this will become contour. And then the backend protocols. This is where it gets goofy. So we're going to take this off. And then on the service, let's go ahead and grab some sort of service.
I can paste you the service definition I have, but
If you want, that's fine. Yeah. I was just going to grab something silly here just to.
Yeah, it takes a silly one.
Yeah, just something just that we can let's pop this into here. Link. Okay, and then this will be Argo CD, something like this, and then link. What do we want to have? The backend is that. So the service, it's going to be Argo CD server. That's what we want. So this is going to be Argo CD server. And there's a different annotation. This is what we talked about on Slack. So to change so originally, like if you think about how Ingress should talk to a backend, a lot of this stuff has the route or the Ingress object saying, this is how the backend should be talked to. Contour originally thought like, hey, the backend service should tell the Ingress controller how it responds or what protocols it supports. So that should be the service's job to say, hey, I'm TLS only, or I'm HTTP only, or I'm a secure gRPC or whatever. That's why it's a service annotation. So down here, there's these contour specific ones, and there's this upstream protocol. So we can grab that, and this is what's going to tell. This is going to upgrade the connection from HTTP to HTTP2 to let you do the gRPC bits. So let's go hop into here, add that, and this is going to be, I think H2 is secure and H2C is insecure. And then what port is it? I guess whatever it is.
I think it's 443, or the name is HTTPS. So if let me see.
Okay, we can just call it. You can always fill in the blanks, yeah. So it's 443, and then this is going to be whatever, Argo CD or whatever it is. So here you can put HTTPS : 443, and that'll match the name or the port numbers. What that does. So now what this is doing is when you deploy this, Contour will when this is referenced from Ingress here. So this is the Argo CD Ingress bit. Let me just. This indentation bugs me. Okay. When this gets deployed, Contour will see this Ingress object, and it'll see, all right, so I have a backend of Argo CD to the port HTTPS. Cool. And then it'll go and look at this service and say, all right, what protocols do I have? And it'll look for this annotation. It'll say, all right, we're going to do, we're going to upgrade the connection to HTTP2, and we're going to use this port as the port we're going to target. Because in theory, well, this should be what indented, shouldn't it? You get it. This will tell it what port, because you could have multiple of these. I could have another one down here. That's a different number, whatever it is. And this will say, all right, so this is the port that we're going to use that protocol on, because maybe the other port is HTTP, which I think is what the Argo example is. One port is gRPC and one port is HTTP. So that should be it, I think, in terms of what you need to do. Yeah. I haven't tried it though. But did you try it? It didn't work, or what?
Yeah, I had both. So I was a little bit confused because I used both annotations for one for gRPC and the other for HTTP, and then I had TLS. And that was where I asked, so it's a bit confusing, but now I understand if it's HTTP, as this is a default, you don't have to specify it in the end, right?
Yeah.
At the service level. So you leave this out, you only mark, let's say, gRPC as a special protocol.
Yeah.
I pasted also the service definition as it's rendered by Argo or by the Argo Helm chart on Slack to you, so you can.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure if.
Too many windows. Okay, so let's go grab this. Whoops. Let's get rid of that, and then this was mine that I created. All right, so we can ditch. Just clean up some of this. Okay. So yeah, let's just go ahead and apply. I think all we need is this. Annotations. Oh.
I think so. You don't have now to prepare. I just wanted to check so that you see the different parts which are defined. And this was maybe also just from naming a bit confusing because I think the gRPC server is listening on 443 and HTTP. Yeah, so that. But basically, it would be really by specifying the annotation up there for gRPC, so H2C. That should basically do the trick. And the ingress definition I already have, but I would always require 2 ingress objects then also for contour, right?
I think so. Yeah, I don't know that we do stuff I should know, right? We can't do TLS pass through direct to the pod with ingress. We can do that with a TCP proxy, which is part of HTTP proxy. But I don't think you can. It'd have to be an annotation out here. I don't believe you can. I don't think with our ingress alone. Can we proxy direct?
Yeah, I was just looking through the docs, Steve, and I didn't find anything supporting that on ingress.
I've done this since day one and stuff. I forget. Yeah, so I don't think you can. Yeah, I think it's only with TCP proxy is how that got, because we actually spin up the L4 filter in Envoy to let you to do that proxying through.
Okay.
Yeah. So with just plain ingress, I think this is your best bet. And I can share this out here if that helps update that GIST I had.
Yeah, that would be better. Then I will try it later.
Can I edit? Or do I forget how to use this thing? Edit. Oops. I make it what, a YAML, make it look pretty. Yeah, there you go.
Perfect.
Yeah. So that's here.
Very cool.
There you go. Yeah, so hopefully that works. I did open an issue, and then maybe this is, again, good spots that folks want to contribute back. I opened up an issue to add docs to the Argo site, to add contour. If you get this working and you feel like wanting to add some docs, that'd be super great. Otherwise, one of us will help probably do it, but I added this just to track it so we don't lose track of what that is. But it'd be great to have in this section here to have a contour section to explain this, you know.
Yeah, I'm happy. And so if this works, then I'm happy also to contribute to Argo so that it's in there.
Sweet. Yeah. We're happy to help. So yeah, if you do that, let us know, because we definitely want to help. At least cheer you on, at least help with some views, or maybe we can poke folks or whatever to help get that in. But yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah. And we could even add a link to this in the contour docs. So we need like an integration section, I think, or something. That'd be a good one, Steve, to have, I think. Because we have integration now with external DNS. We're going to work on integration with Let's Encrypt natively with HTTP proxy. It'd be great to have, you know, all those integrations linked here back to those different places, and then have those linked back to here and vice versa. So that'd be fantastic. Yeah. So hopefully that works. Let me know. I'm curious to see, make sure that works. If not, then let us know, and we'll see what we need to do to get that working for you.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, no worries. Okay. What do we have left? Let's see, Chad had to go, right? But if y'all want to go through the debugging thing, we can do that. Does that sound good? Or anyone else have any other questions? I'm muted talking to myself. Okay. I might have been muted. Anyone else have any questions before we go into? I was going to go into the debugging Envoy thing, or debugging how things when things go wrong. But if not, we can answer questions if someone else has something else. Okay. Well, just jump in and see. If not, we'll dig through this if you'd like. Okay, so what's a good way to think about how to start? Out here on Project Contour, there is an architecture diagram. Yeah. So maybe, is this a good one? Okay. So there's a couple of things we got to think about when something doesn't work in Contour. So the first thing we talked about a little bit about was that IPv6 issue, right? So we have this Contour deployment, and it reaches out to the API server. The error goes two ways here. I think one, because the leader writes back status to the API server. Otherwise, it just receives updates. So every instance of Contour is going to receive updates from all these different objects here. So you can see ingress, services, endpoints, secrets, HTTP proxy, and now extension services. And then if you have those enabled, the service API stuff, once we start getting support for that. So this list will grow. But each instance has its own watch on the API server using those client Go informers. So that's the first thing, right? To figure out, say your traffic isn't working, to see, is Contour connected and is it watching events? If it can't talk to the API server, you'll get a bunch of crazy errors in the logs. So by logs, I mean Contour logs. So going to wherever you're, oh, I don't have it on. Let me, I'm in like dev mode. Let me go turn this on to demo mode, I guess. What did I do here? Oh. And then let's go ahead and apply. Oh. Maybe that's okay. Okay. Let's do this. Okay. Build force delete. Gets it out quickly. Cool. So I have a running cluster, right? So here's my two instances of Contour. So I would just grab the logs of Contour itself. So kubectl logs -f, name of the pod, right? And this should tell us if something's really bad. Like if it can't connect to the API server, then you see it in here, it'd blow up. It would have lots of errors. You can see things here like this invalid TLS certificate. So I was testing something else with a cert missing a common name. It's going to log some errors. So not everything gets set in status. Maybe it should, maybe it shouldn't, but this is part of the idea of looking at conditions going forward. So things like this is a great error for conditions because we don't want to block the resource, but still it's helpful to know that, hey, Contour rejected this thing because it is missing a common name in the certificate. So basically, if this happens, you're not going to serve TLS, but you wouldn't know unless you queried the logs for Contour. So that's one place to look for, right? Look for logs in Contour. Contour will write out lots of things. In this case, we're okay. We also have our Envoy pod, right? So if we go ahead and look on logs of that, you have to do the -c Envoy because there's also the shutdown manager. This is going to be hard because these are kind of crazy. But what you'll see in here, there we go, is you should see some stuff at the beginning here. So let's go up to the top. You should see like this, when Envoy first connects, all it has is enough information to talk to Contour, right? And that's through that bootstrap config. I talked about that before. As soon as it connects, it will go ahead and output what it's built with, right? So here's all of the different filters that Envoy has built in automatically, right? And these are all here because this is using the upstream Envoy image. There is a way you can compile your own. So say you wanted to reduce the scope of what Envoy has. So maybe you don't use, what's a good example? This envoy.squash or these dynamo filters, or I know there's like logging filters in here for things, for certain like vendors. What is it? I forget. There's lots of stuff in here that you may not want it to stick in there, like these IAM credentials and all those different things. You can actually compile Envoy without those in there and remove them out, and that reduces your surface area of, of what could go wrong with Envoy. Anyway, I say all that just to tell you, like, here's a good way to figure out what's turned on in Envoy, I guess, filter-wise. It's going to log it out. And then down here, you should see when it connects to something. So what's the spot? I think at this point it's connected, yeah, because the admin address is set to localhost 9001. So we'll look through this in a second, but this is a really good page to use to debug. And this is what we use all the time when we're developing Contour, to see if the right configuration got to Envoy. By default, we set it to localhost 9001. That's so that it's not accessible to anyone in the network, because you can do some malicious things with this. You can like kill Envoy, you can restart it, you can turn on debugging and all kinds of things through this admin web page. And there's no auth on it. So it's basically always on. But by hiding it under localhost, you got to have the right kube control, port forwarding permissions to get to it. So that's why we do that. And some information you'll see here is some of this stuff. So this like loaded 2 clusters. So this is after it connects to Envoy's XDS server, it loaded 2 clusters, right? So I think Contour gave it 2 static clusters. One is probably stats, and what's the other one? Might be the admin one, the admin and stats. Those might be the 2 different things. But anyway, once you read this enough, you'll start to understand what to look for and what not to look for. And then down here, you can see, this is, we have to go fix this too. These warnings will go away. It's another issue for that. But way at the bottom here, you can see we added 5 clusters, and here's those clusters here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So on my demo machine, my demo thing, I have basically that proxy demo I've used before, and it has 5 different clusters that we use. So here's where those got loaded into Envoy. Let's just get, this is the Envoy logs logging all this stuff out. The naming of these is based on the namespace it's in. So if let's pull up another window on top. So if I go ahead and get services and all namespaces, maybe not. Let's do it in namespaces, project Contour roots. You'll see I've got root app and secure app default. Sorry. No, not that one. Not that one. There it is. So I have root app and secure app, and then secure app default. So here's those 3. And then I have 2 in marketing namespace. So if I do marketing, I have 2. Now you notice there's this external service here, and it's not in that list. Contour only adds clusters that it references from Ingress objects, right? So this service right now isn't referenced from anything, so it doesn't get added to Envoy because it's not used anywhere. So that's why you don't see that in that list. If we added a resource for this, then we'd see that update and that would pop in. Cool, so there's that. So now let's double check, I guess, where to go from here. Let's look at the admin stuff. Is this all clear so far, folks, or if not, let me know. If we port forward to the Envoy pod on 9001, again, this is by default, and we can show you where this comes from. If we hop out to GitHub, under the deployment stuff, if you look at, it's going to be Envoy, I think. Nope, it's going to be Contour. Nope, not that one. I think it's in the config file because we don't define it. By default, Contour sets this stuff. And those are the static clusters. It's a good way to show it to you. Yeah, the best way to show it. So in here, there should be a bunch of ports and stuff. So the HTTP port to use, or the log. Here's the logs. Yeah, the Envoy service HTTP address. So this is the address we're going to set for the HTTP listener. By default, that's 8080. And a lot of times in our definitions, you'll see us override that. So again, here in the contour deployment, you'll see us override that Envoy service port. Right, and here we've set to 80 and we've set the HTTPS port to 443. So that's overriding the default ones. You can almost say that we should probably make the defaults 80 and 443 and then override it to something else, but so is life, that's what it is, right? That's where this comes from. So lots of things in here. So you can configure, I guess in here, there should be, there's the stats port. Yeah, so there's the stats interface. I'll explain that in a second. There should be an admin one too. I forget where we set that. That's weird. I forget where we set that. I set that somewhere. I can look that up or see if you can while we're talking. But that's, again, it's bound over 9001 over localhost. The other thing that we do is we create a whole other port, and that's the stats address and stats port. So because let me just show you the admin page. So here we'll go ahead and port forward, right? So again, I'm port forwarding to my pod in the namespace over 9001. So at this point, if I go ahead and go to localhost 9001, what you'll see here, this is the Envoy admin page. So this is comes out of the stock Envoy pod running in my cluster. And there's lots of stuff in here that we can do, right? So what we can look at is like listeners. This is a good one. So you can see I have one listener, which is ingress HTTP, and that's on 000:80. And I have the stats health one, which is on 8002. This one is exposed because this admin webpage is so crazy, and so you can do so much crazy stuff with it. We expose a different port to get stats. So this is how you can scrape Prometheus endpoints. So essentially what happens is let's go over here. So in here, there's a stats, and these are the stats D stats here. And then there's a stats Prometheus one, which are Prometheus stats. So basically we expose in 00:8002/stats basically gives you these Prometheus stats here. So we just have a quick redirect rule, and we can show you that here in a second. So that you can get to the stats without having to get to the admin webpage. That makes sense. So we're still hiding the admin bits, but we're exposing stats. If you want to see what that looks like, there's a config dump in here. So this config dump section here. I don't know why it says experimental. This has been here forever, but this is all of the config that got dumped onto Envoy. This is running stuff. So if you ever had a problem and you wanted to, like, if we asked for your config or something, this is what we'd be looking for. So this will tell you, what extensions got loaded, and you can tell that based on what's in that startup log that we looked at. Mostly you can skip through all this stuff. But in here, you'll have a bunch of stuff. So here's our static resources, right? So there are static things, and then there are dynamic things. Anything static is going to come from the Bootstrap, that Bootstrap config that we deploy. Anything dynamic will come from Contour, the XDS server, right? So if you see anything in static, so this Contour cluster, we create in the Bootstrap config. And that comes from, I lost the page now. Real quick, sorry. In examples, Contour, Envoy, there's a init container, this stuff. So this Contour Bootstrap. So now when you set the XD address to be Contour, that's going to show up in here under that cluster Contour. So you're going to have a load assignment. So you're going to create a cluster, which we should see here. Here's the cluster. Here's a name called Contour. We max out all these circuit breakers for other things. We can talk about that later. This transport sockets and all this stuff, this is the secure between Envoy and Contour. This is all the cert stuff. And you can see here it's /config/resources. All this stuff is passing in through the local configuration stuff. So shout out to Taro. I think Taro did a lot of this work initially. And then up here, you can see the load assignment. So load assignment in this config relates to endpoints, right? So I think of endpoints in Kubernetes. In Contour or Envoy speak, it's going to be load assignments or cluster load assignments because this is a child of the cluster object. That said, the cluster name is Contour, and then here are the endpoints, all right? And here's the address for Contour, right? So if we wanted to, for fun, what we could do is, let's look at the pods in here and let's describe one of our pods. And let's grab the IP of one of these folks. Here we go. So what I could do is I could edit my daemon set and look for my XDS server bit, which is here. I could change this to be this IP address, right? And this is the IP of one of the pods in Contour running on the cluster. Now, if I delete all my pods, we'll just force delete because that'll be, no, I shouldn't have done that. I deleted all of them. So now I'm gonna get a new IP address. Let's try that again. We'll do this one. Sorry about that. So we will edit this one. We'll do it again. All right, now we'll delete and we'll do label is app envoy. Yeah, can't do all. That makes sense. Okay. So now what should happen is this is gonna get a bootstrap config, but instead of having Contour as the name, it's gonna have that IP address. So what we have to do is we have to go and redo our, where did I have my port forward? Reset my port forward because we deleted the pod, right? The pod's gone, so let's go make a new one. All right, so now if we refresh this, you can see this address now changed from Contour to this IP address, right? And that, again, that's because that came in from the static config set up in the bootstrap. Does that make sense? And all this stuff will repeat. This is kind of why I'm going through this, I guess. Ooh, I froze up there. Cool, so there's that, right? So those are the dynamic bits. I'm sorry, those are the static bits. You can see here the service stats, right? This is where we create that admin web page is on localhost 9001. And there should be a route for this as well, for the stats bit. Those are clusters. That's why those are there. There's our cluster, and then we're going to do it on, yeah. So dynamic bits, right? So LDS, our listeners, you can see that we're configuring the Envoy gRPC endpoint to Contour. So just like we configured Envoy to look for the auth server over gRPC, this is telling Envoy to look for Contour over this gRPC endpoint. This could also be the polling mechanism as well, I think, if you didn't use gRPC, but I'm not going to go down that road today. So there's LDS and then here's CDS. And then here we're going to turn off the admin logs. So when you click through the logs, we're just disabling those. We're sending those to dev null. And then we're setting that admin page to here to localhost 9001 or 127001. Cool. So those are the static bits. And then we're going to have dynamic bits here. Here we go. So dynamic active clusters, right? This is all the stuff that comes from the XDS endpoint. So here you can see there should be 5 of these at this point, right? There should be the 2 in marketing. So there's the first one. Here's the second one. And there should be 3 in the root app. Yeah, here's the root one. There's 1. Here's 2. And here's 3, right? So those are where those map up to. And what you'll see here, and the one downside of how EDS is implemented, I think there's a PR coming in Envoy. But take this cluster here, for example. This is the secure app one. So if I look at pods, namespace, project contour, roots, what I have is this secure app here. So if let's see if I describe service secure app. Oops, not there. Yeah, you can see there's a set of endpoints here, right? Contour will look at these endpoints and then map those to cluster load assignments or EDS in a sense, right? We talked about those are the same things. But you're not going to see that in here, I guess. So if you're looking to see what endpoints got shoved in here, you can't really see it from the admin web page. What you're going to see here is that here's that cluster. And I guess I'll explain this. There's a schema here to why this looks this way. But you'll see that the cluster has a type EDS, right? And that's endpoint. So this is the EDS service. Again, it talks over gRPC. And then the cluster name that we're going to use for EDS is called Contour, right? So it's going to say, hey, look for Contour for your EDS endpoints. But you can't really see them from here. But you have to, there's other ways we can look at it through the Contour CLI, I guess. But that's how those things hook together, right? So there's your cluster, there's your endpoints. We'll come back to this naming here in a second. Here's our listeners, dynamic listeners, right? So again, you get listeners based on having ingress objects. Out of the box, you only get the stats listener. So dynamic wise, I only have one because I don't have any certs in my cluster. And you can see it again, it's 000 over port 80. Here's the filters we have turned on, gzip, gzip web, and then router. You need router to do SNI routing. And then down here, there should be your routes. Filter chains, that's something, yeah. So here's /ready. This is for your readiness probe. Here's /stats. And that's going to map to all domains. So we're not going to map to a specific one. Where's the cluster for that? Oh, here's the cluster. Yeah, service stats, which we saw earlier, right? In our static clusters. Anywho, down here, there should be routes then. Yeah, here's static route configs. Okay, as I talked about, here's this two static routes, ready and stats. And then here's dynamic ones, right? So here's what comes through from Contour. So my cluster, I've got an Intel NUC sitting over here next to me. That's my bare metal cluster. So Sloka Labs is my domain. And you can see we pass off that domain name. Here's /secure. So this should match up to my proxy resource. /secure has like a header match on Chrome. So you can see that we added this regex Chrome thing here. /blog/info has the same thing, blah, blah, blah. So here's all the route stuff, right? And this is what Envoy is going to parse. So essentially at this point, this is what I would be curious to say if, hey, / isn't routing in your cluster, then we could look at this and figure out, all right, / should route to this cluster. That cluster is tied to this thing, and then go back from there. Is it clear so far? Or lost anybody? This name here this is the namespace of where it lives. This is the name of the object. This is the port, and this is the hash of all this stuff. Because in theory, you could reference the same service from two different ingress objects from the same namespace. And you could apply different weights or different things on each reference of that service. So behind the scenes, we create a different cluster in Envoy for each reference of that service. That's why we have the hash here at the end. That's what that means. I do believe that hash is also the headers. So this hash includes the headers in there as that calculation, just to make it unique is all. So here, yeah, we were working with C10 online earlier, and this is why I pumped in that spec. So if we look at edit my root proxy, you'll see I have these request, here we go, response headers policy. And we added this refer policy, permissions policy, and content security policy. So in my config, we ended up with, here's response headers to add. This is the Envoy-ism on the route. And here's that content security policy, permissions policy, and then refer policy. So that's where that got added. So at this point, if you didn't see it from the client, then I'd say it's not Envoy's fault, because it looks like it's doing its job. Here's secrets, and it's cool they don't show you the files anymore. They used to spell out the actual secrets here in the spec, but they don't show up anymore, which is cool. But this is to tell you this is the secrets that are configured through SDS. So the CA TLS cert and CA cert are the certs I think we use to communicate between Envoy and Contour. Cool. So that's Envoy config. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here you can look at. Here's the certs, the version of that. Config dump. Here's where you can break things. So if I this will obviously secure this. If I do a watch on the pods, stick that there, stick that there. So you see up here, I'm pulling it. If I hit health check fail, what you should see here is this should go 1 of 2 ready, because we've just killed Envoy. Come on, demo. There it goes. See that one unhealthy? So we just took Envoy out of service because we can do that from here. If I hit health check OK, that'll make Envoy healthy again, and it should pass its readiness probe. And there it goes, it's healthy again. So you can actually like, take it out of service there. You can actually call, there's a quit in here. Where is it? Here it is, quit. This will terminate Envoy and it'll just die. See, it's just gone now. This is why we secure that thing. I think it restarted because it quit. But there's some cool things in here, right? You can look at stats. If you want to like pick apart certain stats that maybe you don't have Prometheus set up yet, you can look for, requests or whatever. You can query through that if you'd like. You can see some server information here, the version you're running, all that kind of stuff. So it's really helpful to look at certain stuff in here, right? It's a good place to dig through. So here's what we can look. So I actually have an idea. Let's go ahead and debug something real quick. So what we had is there's a way you can set up external names in Kubernetes to reference other domain names, right? So maybe you want to proxy. The original use case was someone had an S3 bucket. They wanted to have users from outside the world send them files, right? But they didn't want to give users access directly to that bucket. They wanted to use like their vanity domain. So what they did was they set up Contour to be a proxy basically to S3. And they'd receive a file over through Contour, and then Contour would proxy it right back out to an S3 bucket. So if I look at Project Contour routes, and there's this external service, let's just describe it. So you can see here, this is my external name, right? And it goes to google.com. So if I go ahead and edit my proxy, and we'll change the root from being this root app here, make this bigger here, from being root app to be external service, and we'll change the port to be 443. And we need to have to rewrite, but it won't work anyway. So I did that work, right? So now if I curl this bare metal.slokalabs.io, I get this error, right? And everyone's seen this before and gone, oh no, what happened to Contour? So I get 503 unavailable, right? So the first thing I do is figure out what's wrong. If I go ahead and get all my proxies, you can see they're all healthy, they're all valid. So at this point, at least from Contour's perspective, everything looks fine. But obviously it's not, because you're getting this 503 unavailable. So next thing I would do is I would go ahead and log Envoy. So do logs-f project Contour envoy-c envoy. And what we'll see down here is we've got at the bottom some 503s. And I think there's a good article from the folks at Ambassador that talked about these Envoy logs. Yeah, this is a good one. We should put this in some notes somewhere. So shout out to the Ambassador folks and Richard Lee. So they have this thing here that talks about all the different codes you might get, which is really helpful because it's not described very well that I can tell anywhere. So we got 503 UF. So right under here, where's UF? Up here maybe. UF, upstream connection failure, right? So that's helpful to say upstream. So again, upstream is from Contour. I'm sorry, from Envoy. Where's my drawing? So from Envoy to the service, that's upstream. From Envoy back to the client, that's downstream, at least in Envoy speak. So 503 upstream connection error means it can't connect upstream to the service. In our case, that's going to be the external name service of google.com. Right, but that doesn't really help us too much because I can't really see why. So what we can do is we can turn on our debugging logs in Envoy, right? So let's go ahead and hop over to here and let's go ahead and edit our daemon set of Envoy. And there should be a log level in here. And by default, it's info. We'll just change this to be debug, right? And this is just on the Envoy parameter. Now this is going to cause Envoy to restart, which could be bad. There might be a way in the admin UI to do this as well, but I'm not sure if it does it hot or not. I've never done it through here. See how they're all info? Query or change logging levels. This would be cool to document if we could do this. I don't know how you change it though. I think you have to like post it or something. You make a post request there. We'll look into that. It's something else to do. Write that down, Steve, for me. That'd be a cool debugging thing. Then I have to restart Envoy. Do you know what I mean? So we'll do that, and then what we'll do is we'll restart Envoy. See, it's going to terminate. To make this faster, we can just force delete that. Okay. Now, the only careful thing is, obviously, we're turning on debug logging, so this is going to get kind of crazy. Okay, so let's do ahead and do our logs again. And now it's a different pod name. Okay, so we're going to see a lot more detail now of what's going on. And you'll see a lot of these request to /ready, and this is Kubernetes. You can see the user agent is kubeprobe. This is the kubelet making a liveness probe check, or I'm sorry, a readiness probe check to Envoy. So you're going to see a lot of that. Sometimes I turn that off to make this a lot less verbose, but because it gets in the way when trying to watch it, and then things blow up. Anyway, so what we can do is let's go ahead and make our request again through here. So we'll go ahead and curl, hit that, cool. You see it popped up here. So now let's see, where's my request to? Oh, I lost it already. Just do it again real quick. Okay, here it is. It's hard to see. Here's the request line here. So you can see the request to baremetal.locallabs.io. It was a GET request. This is my local machine's IP because that was who made the request. And you can see here it says queuing request, no new connections, create new connection, and it's connecting to an IPv6 address here. That's this thing here. And this is what got resolved to. So Envoy does active resolving of DNS endpoints. And that DNS endpoint comes from the external service type. But you can see here it says upstream reset connection failure. Send a local reply, encoding headers, blah, blah, blah. So this basically blew up, right? So it gave you a little bit more information as to what happened. Here's the actual request and all that kind of stuff. So this is helpful here to see what really happened. This doesn't tell you what's wrong. What's wrong is that for some reason I can't route IPv6 from this network that I'm on. So I have to change the DNS lookup to be IPv4 only. That's the solution, and there's a PR for that. Anyway, but this is how you can do that, right? So you can get some more information about what's going on by turning on these debug logs, and you get a lot more information from what's happening. So if you're turning on auth and auth isn't working, this should help at least explain a lot more information about what's wrong or what's not happening. So that's auth. I'm sorry, that's debug logs. That's this logs. We do have I think there's a page on this as well. Is it a guide? Or is it just the doc? Troubleshooting. There you go. Troubleshooting. I think this outlines how to figure out what's going on. Yeah, how to access the admin Envoy admin webpage. Yep, that's what we just did basically. Oh, there is Contour. Yeah, Contour can show you the DAG as well, which is kind of cool. If you're curious of how that got built, and next you can output these little graphs and stuff to see what Contour built out of your configuration, which is cool. Oh, we can do the Contour CLI too. That's kind of cool. So remember I said you couldn't get to the CDS. Let's see. So let's do make install. I don't know what version I have of Contour, so let's rebuild it real quick. Okay. So there is a Contour command called CLI. So Contour CLI. So again, you can watch basically what Contour is sending out to Envoy. So you can see the services we're sending through CDS, the endpoints through EDS, the listeners, the requests, or the routes, and the secrets. So if you're curious about like endpoints, what we could do is we could say Contour CLI EDS. And this is going to fail because it's assuming that Contour is on localhost 8001. So I think what I can do is port forward to that. Or no, we can do it right in the cluster, can't we? So we'll exec into project Contour, and we'll do contour CLI EDS. Ruh-roh. That should work. The way I've done it is you can port forward. I was just trying to exec into the contour CLI from here. Why that doesn't work.
I didn't notice. Do you have TLS on in your contour XDSN? But do you need to disable that?
Oh, the security. It might be the security. Yeah. I wonder if this will get around it. Let's try this real quick. Contour CLI EDS. It might be that. Yeah.
If you add dash insecure in contour command
Yeah,
line.
not going to work here. Yeah. We should make this better. Shouldn't have to go through all this. I mean, you should be able to leave it secure, but then connect to it. That's going to be down here. So what Sarah was saying is that by default, Contour defaults to secure only. So the gRPC endpoint that it serves to Envoy is going to look for these certificates here to go and secure the communication between Envoy and Contour. What you can do is you can override this, and I can say -- insecure, which means now I'm going to run on an insecure port, and we can take these out. Edit the daemon set. That shouldn't matter. Yeah, let's do that too for fun. So down here we can take out where are the certs here, and that will tell Envoy not to use certificates to do that. And let's just delete everything. Cool. So now if I do the exec again, let's try that exec command. You're not found contour. Oh wait, is it /bin? Huh. That demo, huh? Port is not running pod. Let's try that again. Contour CLI EDS. There you go. Huh. Well, I'll work on this. I'll open this year. We can work on this, but shouldn't be this hard. But this is how you can see what Contour is sending out from its endpoints. So you can kind of debug what's going on. So before I mentioned, there's not an easy way that I know of to see what's the contents of EDS. But through this, you can see at least what Contour is sending to Envoy. So what we can look at is here's that project Contour marketing /info. This is the service called info in the namespace project Contour marketing. And you can see that, remember, cluster load assignment is basically EDS in Envoy. And here's the socket address. So that app is running over 192.168.206.28 on port 8080. And we could double check that if we want. If we just describe that pod, it should be there. If we go ahead and scale up, scale the deployment, project Contour, what is it, marketing, info to replicas, I don't know, 3. In theory now, once that scales, and we do this again, there should be 3 endpoints in there. Yeah. So now there's 1, 2, and 3 for that one cluster. Because now there's 3 endpoints in Kubernetes. Here's another service, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? So you can see things. I think this is supposed to stream as well. So change as you go. You can look at things like CDS. And you can see that now this is looking at the same kind of things that are in the Envoy admin page. But at least you can debug to see what Contour is sending. That was the intent of it originally. So here's that SNI for google.com. That's the external service that we created. Yeah. So that's the contour CLI. That's the idea of that. And that's what was referenced here into this thing. Yeah, we'll have to figure this out. This is what used to work, kube control exec, and for some reason it's not working now. So we'll figure that out. We've always used Scratch, so I'm not sure why. Unless we moved where the binary is. /bin/contour. That's what I thought. Yeah, there's the info. So that's like the generic page, I didn't send it a command. Contour CLI EDS. Now it works, right? Did I just do that before? I might have typed it wrong, but there you go. So you can exec into it. I bet you the exec would work, Taro, if I passed it the certs. Contour CLI. I think there's.
But you don't have the envoy. You would need envoy certs to be a client, and you don't
But
have
they
it.
But they should be in the contour pod because of how contour loads them. Right. So out here in the contour config, by default they're here. This /certs. So if we left the security on, I should be able to pass in, contour exec into the pod, contour CLI EDS, and then pass in these files, and then because the certs exist in that contour pod.
But these are the server certs, the XDS server cert.
Yeah.
And in order to act as the CLI is acting as a client, isn't it?
Yeah. I guess you're right. Yeah. All right, we'll figure this out. We'll come up with something. Yeah, that's unfortunate. But turning it off, I guess, lets you see it. I honestly haven't used this a whole lot, to be sure. I mean, I look at the Envoy admin page a lot more than I've ever used this. But at least it's neat to see if you can't get EDS to work. That's the way I've looked at EDS. So that helps. But, yeah, so that's that. Any questions? It's me talking for like 2 hours, so I don't want to stop.
I noticed on this debug page, we don't have a section on how to actually turn on debug level logging for both Contour and Envoy. And once you've done it, it's straightforward, but the first time through, it'd be helpful to have it documented. So I'll take an action item to add a section here.
Okay, very cool. Thanks, Steve. Yeah. We can also update this, at least for now, that this doesn't work unless you turn off the security. I guess you could deploy a new. You could deploy a new pod, right?
Yeah, that would work.
A new Contour pod somewhere. Be a good way to do it, maybe.
Yeah, mount envoy certificates. But I think that there was a subject name check, so you cannot just have any. You cannot have the server certificate. You need to have the envoy.
Yeah. Certificates, right?
Yeah.
Or we could do something. We could make like a job that generates them on the fly that gives you a pod that, I don't know. Because it's kind of helpful. We need like a better toolkit. And this stuff comes up a lot now, I think, folks.
I think you cannot even do that because but at least with CertCan, wasn't it so that it removes the CA key?
Oh, you're right. Yeah, our job. Yeah.
you painted yourself in the corner now.
That was to be super secure because we didn't want to leave it around, but yeah.
Yeah, that was a good decision. So.
Yeah, you're right. Yep. All right, we'll figure it out. At least for now, like you could run a new pod probably. You could spin up a new pod. What we just did with security off and leave your production running and then just debug it that way. That would work, I think.
I mean, it's of course you can just create a new pod with Contour and mount envoy certificates in that.
Yeah, I guess you could do that too. Yeah. Yep.
It's not a one-liner, but anyway.
Yeah. So it was what Tara was saying is you could come down to here and mount the certs that are down here. These certs, these Envoy certs, which come from what? the Envoy cert secret. So mount that secret into the Contour CLI pod, and then it would talk on over the secure network. Yeah. Yep, that would do it. That'd be great.
Yeah, I wonder if there. I never looked at if kubectl run or what was that deprecated even. But is there like a one-liner that could take the volume mounts?
I don't know. I remember run was deprecated because I used to do like run like Nginx all the time, like just to get some generic pod in the cluster. You can see I have that there.
Maybe then something like, I don't know, create pod and some strange parameters in order to have one-liner for also mounting the volumes.
Yeah. I think we could come up with that, and then just swap in the right namespace or something. Yeah, we could do that. So we'll do that. Then you wouldn't have to change anything. Then when you're done, you delete that pod. As long as we don't have as long as it doesn't have the same label selectors as Contour, no one will connect to it. Like other envoys will try and connect to it. So that we can do that. Yeah. Cool.
I suppose other alternative would be to have another like second gRPC endpoint listening in localhost without TLS. But that would be a little more work to do.
Yeah, that would work too. Yeah, I'll think about that. Yeah.
If nobody has complained so far, so maybe this is not used so often, so maybe the pod version would be easier.
Yeah, like I said, I rarely use this, to be honest, personally. I run Contour locally on my machine and talking to a Kubernetes cluster. And then I use the Envoy admin page all the time. So that's my two big things. But it's helpful, I guess, if someone else wants to see or helps, debug other things. So cool. Well, we've got 5 minutes. We could end early, or if anyone has any other questions, I don't really have anything else to chat about unless someone else has a question or something they want to talk about. Oh, I missed chat. Andreas said his Argo stuff works. Cool. That's very cool. Well, if no one has anything else, I think maybe we can end it here. Do the old give you 4 minutes back on your calendar thing.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, y'all. Yeah, well, thanks for coming. We'll have to come up with a schedule for next week or for the next few sets of these because I think our schedules at a date now because we've used them all up. We've done a month of this, I think, or so, or 2 months of this. So yeah, that's it. We've been doing it every 2 weeks. If we need to do it more often, we can do it more often. Just let us know what you all need, and we'll go from there. I think the next community meeting is Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. That's the U.S. time zone, and then that's it. Yeah. So thanks everyone for coming. Thanks for chatting.
Cool. Thank you guys. Thanks, Steve, and well, both Steves. Appreciate you guys very much.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Take care, everyone. We'll catch y'all later.
See ya.
Bye-bye.